Hello everyone. For my portion of teaching, I was assigned on the first section, which is the anatomy of the digestive system. And to just start off, we're just going to talk about how if you cut the entire digestive system cross-section wise, that it is made up of 4 main layers. So we're just going to go ahead and start with that. The first layer, starting from close to the lumen, is the mucosa. And the mucosa is the layer that directly touches the food. It's comprised of epithelial layer and an underlying loose connective layer called the lamina propria, and a thin layer of smooth muscle called the muscularis mucosa. The epithelial cells are organized in single layers, with mostly being enterocytes, which are divided into absorptive enterocytes, and those that express different proteins that are important for digestion and absorption, and endocrine enterocytes, or those that release hormones necessary for regulation of digestion. The epithelium varies greatly from one part of the digestive system to the other. Also, the surface area varies in arrangement of the villi, which is the finger-like projections. The villi increases the surface area, and there's also something called the crypts. They're invaginations designed to house the endocrine cells, as well as stem cells that replace epithelial cells every 4 to 5 days. And then the lamina propria is rich in lymph tissues and vessels, capillaries, and nerve fibers. Folds and ridges of the mucosa are a result of the contraction of the muscularis mucosa. So that's the mucosa. The second layer is the submucosa, which is this area all right here. And the submucosa is just below the mucosa. It consists of both connective tissue, full of interweaving large blood vessels, and some sections contain large glands that secrete material into lumen of the digestive system. It also contains submucosal plexus, which directs granular secretion. Then we have the muscularis, which is this part right here. And the muscularis, this part right here. The muscularis consists of 2 layers of smooth muscle, the inner circular layer and the outer longitudinal layer. It contains a second nerve plexus, which is the myoenteric nerve plexus, and that controls the contraction of these layers' ability to generate peristaltic, which is contractions that propel food through the tract down to the stomach. And then the last layer is the serosa. And the serosa is connective tissue that envelopes the tubes and just maintains the lubrication of all of the tubes. So, the main function of the digestive system is to mechanically and also enzymatically convert complex substances to simpler forms that can be absorbed to provide energy to the cells, which is digestion. It specifically is designed for carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Each hollow organ is separated by sphincters. So to start off, we're going to start off with the mouth and what the mouth does. The Parts of the mouth that are important to the digestive system are the teeth, the salivary glands, and the tongue. The teeth begin the process by chewing the food, which is also called mastication. Salivary glands secretes the saliva, which helps form a bolus, which is a small rounded mass of substance, which can be swallowed into the esophagus to pass to the stomach. Saliva also contains an enzyme, alpha amylase, that starts the breakdown of carbohydrates. It cleanses the teeth and mouth and contains IgA antibodies, which is essential for mucosa immunity. So, food goes down the esophagus to the stomach by the epiglottis. So, there's a picture of the epiglottis and the esophagus. So, the epiglottis is a flap of elastic cartilage that guards the entrance to the trachea and prevents food from entering the trachea. Once it's in this esophagus, the bolus of food continues to move through the digestive system in rhythmic muscular contractions called peristalsis. And the mouth is separated from the esophagus by the upper esophageal sphincter. And then the esophagus is separated by the stomach by the lower esophageal sphincter. I'm probably saying that totally wrong, but it's also called the cardiac sphincter. And if the cardiac sphincter receives any irritation, it can cause acid reflux or heartburn. So, moving to the stomach. This is just the different parts of the stomach. You have the upper part, which is called the fundus. This is the esophagus, and this is the cardiac sphincter. Then you have the greater curvature and then the lesser curvature over here. This is the pyloric sphincter, which separates the stomach from the small intestine. And these are the gastric folds inside the stomach. And these are just the different layers of the stomach as well. So, just a basic anatomy of the stomach. The stomach is a temporary storage chamber and churning apparatus that contains hydrochloric acid and the enzyme pepsin, which both of those together initiate protein breakdown. The stomach can extend from 50 milliliters to 100, and the surface area is enhanced by the presence of gastric glands that contain mucus-secreting cells, parietal cells, chief cells, and various endocrine cells. The stomach is separated from, like I said, the small intestine by the pyloric sphincter. So, yeah, there's the stomach. The next thing is the small intestine. And I like this picture because it separates each part of the small intestine. And its primary function of the small intestine is it's the site of enzymatic digestion and absorption. 95% of absorption to the blood happens in the small intestine. And like I said, it's made up of 3 different sections. And the first one is the duodenum. It's the shortest section, but it is the most important because it receives the secretions from the accessory organs, such as the gallbladder and the pancreas. And then the second section is the jejunum, and then the last section is the ileum. And there are folds in the small intestine that are called circular folds. There's also walls of organs that contain villi, like I said, that are the finger-like projections. Each intestinal cell, which is under the enterocyte, has microvilli that project above the surface. And all of those things, this is also called the microvilli. or excuse me, the brush border. The villi is also called the brush border, and that helps increase absorption. And all of these different things helps increase the surface area of the small intestine. So the next part is the liver. And the liver processes the nutrients it receives from absorption by the small intestine and can store carbohydrates, lipids, vitamins, and minerals, and synthesizes various kinds of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids from substrates that arrive from the blood. So an example of that is, so the liver takes glucose and stores it as glycogen, or it will take amino acids and make them into glucose. So that's just some examples of what that means. The liver can also store or provide substrates to help maintain homeostasis. It also produces bile, which is essential for digestion of the lipids in the small intestine. Another cool part that's close to the liver is called the gallbladder, and the gallbladder is just where the bile is stored until it is needed. Next is the pancreas, and the pancreas secretes digestive enzymes needed for carbohydrates, proteins, and lipid breakdown, as well as buffers that reduce acidity of fluids entering from the stomach into the small intestine via the pancreatic duct. And then, for the last thing, we've got the large intestine, and there's 3 different parts to this. You have the ascending colon, transverse colon, and the descending, and you also have the appendix that's connected to that, and the rectum is where it ends. And the large intestine is separated from the small intestine by the ileocecal sphincter. And the large intestine absorbs fluids and stores fecal matter before expulsion. There is no further breakdown of food in the large intestine, and the main function is to absorb salts and water and convert chyme to fecal matter. The large intestine necessary for absorption is necessary for the absorption of vitamin K, which is important for blood clotting processes in the blood. And vitamin K is produced by a good or friendly bacteria, in the large intestine. And expulsion brings us to the final 2 sphincters in the digestive system, and that is the internal and external anal sphincter. The internal sphincter is reflexively controlled, but the external anal sphincter is different. It is voluntarily controlled. So, for my questions on here are, what is another term for chewing food? And what part of the small intestine is most important, and what does it do? Hopefully this helps.